It was a quiet Saturday morning in our suburban neighborhood. The sunlight peeked through the blinds, and I was making pancakes in the kitchen while my 7-year-old son, Ethan, sat at the table, humming to himself. We lived in a nice, modest home at the edge of the neighborhood, and while most neighbors were friendly, there was one person who constantly caused trouble, our infamous HOA Karen. She patrolled the street as if she were the sheriff, barking at people about trash cans, grass height, or even the shade of curtains in their windows. For months, she had been bothering me, trying to claim authority over my house even though my property technically sat outside the HOA's jurisdiction. But Karen never cared about details. To her, every house within sight was under her control. That morning, I noticed her SUV creeping past our driveway, slower than usual. I ignored it. Karen had a habit of patrolling, and honestly, I was tired of giving her energy. Ethan looked up from his pancake and said, "Mom, why does that lady always stare at our house?" I chuckled softly and told him not to worry, but deep down, I had a bad feeling. A couple of hours later, as Ethan played with his Legos in the living room, I decided to take a quick shower upstairs. Before going, I reminded him, "Remember, sweetheart, if anything feels wrong, press the panic button near the front door." "Okay," he nodded proudly, knowing how serious I was. Minutes later, just as the hot water relaxed my shoulders, I heard it a loud crash. My heart jumped. I froze, water running down my face. Then came the sound of my son's high-pitched scream. "Mom, someone's here." I grabbed a towel and sprinted downstairs. What I saw made my blood boil. There, halfway through my living room window, was HOA Karen, herself literally crawling inside, one leg already on the carpet, her face twisted with smug determination. Ethan stood by the wall, trembling, his small finger hovering over the panic alarm panel. "What do you think you're doing in my house?" I shouted, my voice shaking with rage. Karen didn't flinch. She dusted her blouse and replied with absolute arrogance, "This is an HOA violation. You can't keep that playset in your backyard. If you won't let me inspect it, I'll do it myself." My jaw dropped. She had broken into my home over a swing set. Before I could even process it, Ethan slammed his tiny hand onto the panic button. Immediately, the alarm blared, red lights flashed on the panel, and a deafening siren filled the house. Karen's smug face turned pale. What is that?" she shrieked, covering her ears. "That," I hissed, "is the sound of you getting arrested." Within minutes, the wail of sirens echoed from outside. Our security system had alerted the police directly. Ethan clung to my leg as to patrol. Cars screeched into our driveway, their lights painting the walls red and blue. Neighbors peeked from their windows, some even stepping outside in pajamas, whispering as they saw Karen being confronted. The officers entered quickly. "Ma'am, step away from the homeowner," one of them ordered. Karen tried to defend herself, flailing her arms. "I'm on the HOA board. I have the right," she screamed. The officer gave her a look that could cut glass. "You have no right to enter private property without permission. This is trespassing and breaking and entering." Karen's face went from red to ghostly white as the handcuffs clicked around her wrists. She kept shouting, trying to spin her nonsense story about rules and bylaws, but the officers weren't buying it. They escorted her out of my house, past the crowd of neighbors who now recorded the spectacle on their phones. Ethan tugged on my sleeve and whispered, "Mom, did I do the right thing?" I knelt down and hugged him tightly. "You did exactly the right thing, sweetheart. You protected us." The police gave me a full report and promised that Karen would face charges. As their cars drove away with her inside, the neighborhood erupted with murmurs, some laughing, some shaking their heads in disbelief. For once, Karen's iron grip of intimidation had shattered. That night, as I tucked Ethan into bed, he smiled proudly. "I was brave today, wasn't I?" I kissed his forehead and told him he was my hero. And from that day forward, Karen never dared to crawl through my window anyone else's ever again. The next morning, the neighborhood buzzed like a hive of gossiping bees. Word of Karen's dramatic arrest had already spread across every doorstep. I could hear whispers as I stepped outside to collect the mail. A group of neighbors stood clustered at the corner, pretending to walk their dogs while exchanging wide-eyed retellings of Karen climbing through a window like a cat burglar. Mrs. Thompson from across the street waved me over. "Honey, is it true? She actually crawled inside." Her voice was half concerned, half thrilled by the scandal. I sighed, still shaken, and confirmed it. Gasps erupted, and phones came out as if my words were evidence to be tweeted. Later that day, a neatly dressed man came to my door. He introduced himself as Mr. Dillard, the official HOA president. Unlike Karen, he seemed polite, but his visit carried tension. "I heard there was an incident with one of our members," he said carefully. I crossed my arms, my patience thin. "With all due respect," I replied, "your member broke into my home. My 7-year-old had to hit a panic button because she thought she was entitled to inspect my backyard." Mr. Dillard frowned deeply, rubbing his temples. "Karen has been overzealous, but I assure you, she does not speak for the board in this matter." I wasn't convinced. Then explain why she's been harassing me for months about rules that don't even apply to my property. Before he could answer, Ethan walked into the room with his toy police car and blurted out, "She was yelling at me last week too, said my bike was a violation." His innocent voice cut sharper than any argument I could have made. Mr. Dillard sighed. "I'll admit Karen has crossed a line. The board will be meeting tonight to discuss her removal." That evening, the cul-de-sac became a stage. Neighbors gathered again, this time outside the HOA clubhouse where the emergency meeting was held. People argued in clusters, some furious at Karen, others secretly defending her strictness. Inside, the board sat stiffly at a long table, the air heavy with judgment. When my turn came to speak, I described everything: the harassment, the false claims, and finally, the terrifying moment Karen crawled into my window while my child screamed. My voice shook with emotion, and the silence that followed was deafening. Then, from the back of the room, Karen herself appeared. Disheveled from a night in custody, she stormed to the front. "You're all ungrateful," she barked. "I've been protecting this neighborhood for years. Without me, property values will plummet. Look at her house, she lets her kid leave. Toys outside. It's disgusting." The board president slammed his gavel. "Karen, enough. You trespassed into a private home and traumatized a child. You've abused your role for the last time." Gasps echoed as the board voted unanimous. Karen was stripped of her HOA authority, effective immediately. Outside, the crowd erupted into applause, some even cheering. Ethan squeezed my hand and whispered, "Does this mean she can't bother us anymore?" I nodded, feeling a weight lift, but as Karen was escorted out, she shot me a glare so sharp it felt like a promise. "This isn't over," she hissed. And in that chilling moment, I realized, although her reign in the HOA was finished, Karen wasn't done with me yet. For the first time in months, I slept peacefully. No Karen notes taped to my door. No endless HOA violation letters. But peace doesn't last long in a neighborhood ruled by someone like her. The following morning, I walked Ethan to the bus stop. Parents stood chatting in their robes, pretending life was normal, but every few minutes I felt eyes flick to me. The story had spread like wildfire. I wasn't just the new neighbor anymore. I was the one who got Karen arrested. Night, as I tucked Ethan into bed, he whispered, "Mommy, I saw Karen's car drive by again." My stomach nodded. She wasn't supposed to be near us, but sure enough, when I peeked through the curtains, her silver SUV crawled past my driveway like a predator circling prey. The next morning, I discovered my mailbox had been ripped out of the ground. The day after, a trash bag was dumped across my lawn. Small things, petty things, but every act screamed Karen. I knew she was retaliating, even if I couldn't catch her in the act. I called the police again, but the officer sighed. "Without proof, ma'am, there's little we can do. If you can set up cameras, we might have a case." So that weekend, I installed security cameras all around the house, a fortress of blinking red lights. Ethan watched with wide eyes. "Is Karen scared of cameras?" he asked. I smiled weakly. "She should be." Sure enough, 2 nights later, the cameras caught movement. At 2:17 a.m., headlights flashed across my driveway. Karen, who'd pulled low, crept toward my trash bins and dumped a sticky mess of spoiled food across the yard. Then she raised her face, staring straight at the lens like she wanted me to know it was her. The next morning, I showed the footage to the police. This time, they didn't hesitate. "That's vandalism," the officer confirmed. "She's violating her bail conditions. We'll handle it." But before the police even arrived, Karen showed up at my door herself. She pounded on it so hard, the glass rattled, shouting, "You think you've won? You think some cameras will stop me? You ruined my life." Ethan clung to my leg, trembling. I refused to open the door, my voice shaking but firm. "Karen, leave. Before you make this worse." Her eyes, wild and furious, met mine through the window. "Worse," she snarled. "Oh honey, you don't know the meaning of worse." The patrol car rolled into view, seconds later, blue and red lights cutting through the night. Karen bolted, running across the lawn like a madwoman, but the officers caught her within minutes. From my porch, I watched as she screamed and kicked, handcuffs glinting under the streetlights. The neighbors, awakened by the chaos, gathered again in their pajamas. But this time, no one defended her. They only watched in stunned silence as Karen was shoved into the back of the squad car. Ethan looked up at me, whispering, "Is she going to jail forever?" I knelt down, brushing his hair back. "Maybe not forever, sweetheart, but long enough for us to breathe again." Yet, as the police car pulled away, a cold unease settled over me. People like Karen don't give up, and deep down, I knew this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of her spiral. The morning after Karen's second arrest, the street buzzed with gossip. Neighbors huddled in small circles, whispering in low voices as I walked Ethan to the bus stop. Some nodded at me sympathetically. Others turned away, their faces tight with judgment. By noon, a crisp white envelope appeared on my porch. I didn't even need to open it to know who it was from. The HOA board. Inside was a typed letter full of legal jargon. According to the community guidelines, my home security cameras were in violation of aesthetic standards. My trimmed hedges were unapproved landscaping modifications. And my mailbox, still missing from Karen's tantrum, was now a safety violation that needed to be replaced immediately. It was clear the HOA wasn't protecting me. They were circling the wagons around Karen. That evening, I attended the HOA meeting in the community clubhouse. The air smelled of burnt coffee and tension. Karen wasn't there, but her loyal allies filled the folding chairs, glaring at me as I took a seat in the back. The president, a slick man named Richard, cleared his throat. "We've received multiple complaints regarding your property," he announced loudly, as if rehearsed. "We, the board, are issuing fines until compliance is met." My heart pounded. "You're penalizing me." I gestured toward the absent Karen, broke into my home. After she vandalized my yard, a woman in pearls sniffed. "Karen has lived here for 15 years. You've been here 6 months. Perhaps you don't understand how we do things." I almost laughed, the absurdity of it. But then Richard leaned forward, his voice dripping with smugness. "If you can't follow our rules, perhaps this isn't the right neighborhood for you." The room hummed with quiet approval from Karen's loyalists. My stomach twisted. This wasn't just about Karen anymore. The HOA itself had become her weapon. When I returned home, Ethan was waiting by the window. "Mommy, did they help us?" he asked hopefully. I forced a smile. "Not yet, sweetheart. But we'll figure it out." That night, I spread the fines and letters across the kitchen table. Thousands of dollars in penalties. Threats of legal action. And beneath it all, Karen's smirking face haunted me. But as I sat there, my fear hardened into something else resolved. If Karen wanted a war, she was going to get one. Not with screaming, not with vandalism, but with the very thing she underestimated me for. My brains, my patience, and my refusal to back down. I pulled out my laptop and began researching HOA bylaws, state housing statutes, precedent cases. By the time the clock struck midnight, I had a plan. Karen thought she had turned the HOA into her shield. What she didn't realize was that I was about to use their own rules to destroy them from the inside out. The next morning, I sat at my kitchen table sipping coffee, staring at the HOA fines spread before me. It looked like a stack of Monopoly money, except this wasn't a game. This was Karen's doing. Her reach extended straight into the heart of the board. But what Karen didn't know was that I had spent half the night combing through the HOA bylaws and the state's housing regulations, and I found something big. Buried deep in the HOA's governing documents was a clause that the board had quietly ignored for years. Every fine, every rule enforcement, every penalty had to be backed by an official vote and documented with meeting minutes. If it wasn't, was unenforceable. And guess what? Not a single fine I'd received had any record attached. Ethan sat at the counter eating cereal, swinging his legs while I packed his lunch. "Mommy, are we in trouble with the neighborhood?" he asked. I kissed his forehead. "No, sweetheart, they're the ones in trouble. They just don't know it yet." That afternoon, I decided to test my theory. I marched down to the HOA office, a stuffy little room next to the clubhouse that reeked of paper and mildew. Richard, the HOA president, looked surprised when I walked in holding the fines. "Ah, Mrs. Carter," he said smoothly. "I trust you've come to settle your balances." I smiled sweetly. "Actually, I've come to request the official board meeting minutes where these fines were voted on. As per Section 14, Article 3 of the bylaws, every penalty must be backed by majority approval." For the first time, his smile faltered. "Well, that's just a formality. Then it should be easy for you to produce the records." I leaned in, keeping my voice calm but firm. "If you can't, then these fines are invalid, and any further attempts to collect them will constitute harassment." His jaw tightened. He knew I had him cornered. When I left, a couple of neighbors were hanging around the clubhouse. One of them, a tired-looking mom named Lisa, caught up with me in the parking lot. "Hey," she whispered, glancing around nervously. "I heard what you said in there. You're right. You know, they've been slapping us with fake fines for years. Most of us just pay them because we're scared." That stopped me in my tracks. Karen's abuse wasn't just personal, it was systemic. The HOA had been using intimidation to squeeze money out of everyone. Lisa's voice shook. "If you're really going to fight them, you won't be alone. A lot of us are sick of it." For the first time since moving here, I felt something I hadn't in months: hope. That night, as I tucked Ethan into bed, I whispered a promise to myself. No more running. No more being scared. Karen had started this war by crawling through my window, but I was going to finish it by tearing down her little kingdom, piece by piece, and the first blow had already landed. The next morning, I woke up to a strange scratching noise on my front door. At first I thought it was an animal, but when I opened it, I found something much worse. A bright orange notice was taped right across the glass. "Eviction warning. HOA ordered." My blood boiled. Eviction? For what? This wasn't even an apartment, it was my privately owned home. They had no right, no legal standing. But Karen didn't care about legality. She cared about intimidation. I ripped the paper down and stormed inside, my hands shaking. Ethan padded into the kitchen, rubbing his eyes. "Mommy, why are they being so mean to us?" I crouched down to his level, pulling him close. "Because sometimes, sweetheart, bullies don't stop when you ask them nicely. But that's okay. We know the truth, and the truth is stronger than their lies." Later that day, I walked to Lisa's house to tell her what had happened. But before I could knock, I noticed she wasn't alone. For other neighbors were sitting in her living room, voices hushed and faces tense. When they saw me, Lisa waved me in. "We've been talking," she said. "Karen's pushing harder than ever. The board is terrified, but they won't stand up to her. If you're really serious about fighting, we're with you." It felt like a spark had been lit in the room. One man, Greg, a retired veteran, leaned forward. "That woman fined me $500 because my grandson's bike was left in the driveway. I paid it because I didn't want trouble. But I've had enough." Another, Maria, whispered. "She threatened to foreclose on us if we didn't paint our house her approved color. Do you know how many families had to borrow money just to comply?" Every story was worse than the last, and every story was proof. Karen had built her power on fear and lies. That night, I printed copies of the bylaws I'd found. I highlighted the parts about fines and enforcement, the parts they'd conveniently ignored. We made a plan, but Karen wasn't blind. She sensed the shift. The very next day, she stormed up to my porch, her hair perfectly sprayed, sunglasses perched like armor. She didn't even knock, she just started yelling. "You think you're clever, don't you?" riling up the neighbors. Stirring dissent. "Let me remind you, this community is mine, and if you don't like it, you can pack up and leave." I held my ground. "It's not your community, Karen. It belongs to all of us, and you don't get to crawl through people's windows and terrorize their kids just to get your way." Her nostrils flared, but then her lips curled into a cold smile. "We'll see who wins this little game. You have no idea who you're dealing with." She turned on her heel and marched away. But her words weren't a warning. They were a threat, and deep down, I knew Karen wasn't done. She was about to escalate again, and this time, she wouldn't just target me. She'd target everyone standing with me. The very next week, the retaliation began. Greg, the retired veteran who had spoken up, found a violation notice taped to his garage. Unapproved flags and decorations. $300 fine. He had a small American flag and a wind chime. That was it. Maria, the sweet woman with the painted house story, received a letter claiming her garden gnome collection was unsightly debris. Another $200 fine. Even Lisa, my closest ally, got hit. Karen accused her of improper trash storage because her bin lid wasn't fully closed one night. $100. Karen was sending a clear message: stand with her, or be punished. When I saw the fear in my neighbors' faces, guilt twisted in my stomach. Was I putting them in danger by pushing back? Was Karen too powerful to fight? But then Ethan said something that shook me. As I tucked him into bed one night, he whispered, "Mommy, I'm not scared of her. She's just a mean lady. And mean people can't win if we're all nice together, right?" His words hit me harder than anything Karen had thrown my way. If my 7-year-old could see through her intimidation, why couldn't we? The next day, we held another meeting, but this time, more neighbors showed up. Stories poured out like a flood. An elderly couple forced to pay thousands to remove their swing set for their grandkids. A single mom fined for having her car parked on the street for 10 minutes. Every story painted the same picture. Karen was abusing her authority, weaponizing HOA rules that barely even applied. So we decided to act. We created a petition to call for a vote, one that could remove Karen as HOA president. We printed flyers, slipped them under doors, and whispered in driveways when her spies weren't around. And slowly, support grew. People who had been silent for years were finally speaking up, but Karen wasn't blind. One afternoon, as I was stapling flyers to a community board, Karen stormed up in her heels, ripped them down, and hissed, "Do you think this will stop me? You think you can embarrass me? I built this HOA, and I will bury anyone who tries to take it from me." Her face was red, her hands trembling, but for the first time, I saw something else in her eyes. Not just anger, fear. She was losing control, and she knew it. That night, as I locked my doors, I couldn't shake the feeling she would do something reckless, something dangerous. And I was right, because by morning, Karen wasn't just trying to silence us with fines or threats. She was about to bring the law into it. The next morning, a loud knock rattled my door. When I opened it, 2 uniformed officers stood there, stern expressions on their faces. Karen was behind them, arms crossed, smirking like she had just won the lottery. "Ma'am," one of the officers began, "we've received a complaint of harassment, community disruption, and property damage filed against you." My jaw dropped. Harassment? Property damage? Karen stepped forward, voice dripping with venom. "You've been trespassing, vandalizing community property, and inciting hostility against the HOA. These officers are here to serve." You notice she handed me a thick envelope. A lawsuit. For a moment, my knees buckled. This wasn't just fines or gossip anymore. Karen had taken it to the courts, but before I could respond, Ethan darted forward. That's a lie. Mommy didn't break anything. She's the one who broke into our house. The officers exchanged glances. One of them frowned. Is this true, ma'am? There was a report of a break-in recently. Karen's face paled for a split second before she recovered. The child is confused. Kids imagine things. This woman is manipulating him. But Ethan wasn't done. He sprinted to the kitchen, grabbed the little security tablet we used, and pulled up the footage. There it was. Karen crawling through our window, caught in crystal clear video. The officer's eyebrows shot up. Karen gasped, her hand flying to her chest. That's taken out of context. I was checking on the safety of the home. The officer turned to her, through the window, without permission. Her smirk was gone now. For the first time, I saw real panic. They didn't arrest her, not yet, but they told her she had no authority to enter private property, and that the footage would be reviewed if this escalated further. Karen stormed off, her heels stabbing the pavement, muttering under her breath. But I knew what she was really thinking. She had just been cornered. Later that night, our neighbor, Greg, came over. She's desperate. I've seen this before. When tyrants start losing their grip, they lash out. But you've got proof now. That video could take her down. He was right, but the lawsuit still loomed, and Karen wasn't going to stop. If anything, she would double down. And sure enough, 2 days later, I got another letter. This time, not just a fine, not just HOA nonsense, but a formal demand from her lawyer threatening foreclosure on my home if I didn't comply with HOA standards. The problem? I didn't even live inside her HOA boundaries. That's when I realized Karen wasn't fighting with rules anymore. She was fighting with pure spite. And she was willing to burn the entire neighborhood down to win. But what she didn't know was that Ethan, of all people, had just given us the weapon we needed to end her reign once and for all.